Well, welcome back to another week of pandemonium. I don't know about you, but I have been going through a lot of mood changes, even in the course of an hour, certainly in a day, despair and anger and boredom and fear. You are not alone, by the way. I mean, this is broad ranging. This is not just your region, your state. It's not even your nation. This is around the world. So far, almost 150,000 Americans have died from this pandemic. Many of those deaths were avoidable. They were avoidable because we've got somebody in the White House who could have done a job such as was done in many other advanced so-called rich nations, bringing down the number of deaths, the number of diseases, the number of infections, but he did not. The person in the White House I'm talking about, obviously, is Donald Trump, who Rex Tillerson called, I think appropriately, maybe the wisest thing Rex Tillerson ever said, called him a fucking moron, and he is. Look, I'm feeling right this minute a lot of anger because we've got 99 days until this upcoming election when we can get rid of the moron, worse than a moron, a malicious moron in the White House. You know, in terms of the infections and in terms of the deaths, right now, the biggest bottleneck is that you can't do, the laboratories across this country cannot do quickly the kind of tracing they need to do, the contact tracing. Why can't they do the contact tracing? Because they can't do the tests quickly. If you can't do the tests within 7 to 10 days, then forget contact tracing. It's too late. The reason they can't do the tests quickly is because they lack chemicals and machines, and they lack all of the swabs. They lack everything they need. Why don't they have the things they need? Why is it that Italy and Germany and every other country that's been through this has had everything they need to do the contact tracing? Well, it's because Donald Trump refused to use the Defense Production Act to get the supplies he needs, that the nation needs in order to do the contact tracing. Now, why did he refuse? He refused because he wanted to put the responsibility for all this, and he still wants to put the responsibility for all this on states and locales. Don't fall for what the press is now saying. Donald Trump has seen the light. He's now using a mask. He's now warning that it could get worse. He is still exercising no responsibility for making sure that there are adequate tests and adequate contact tracing and adequate isolation of people who have the disease. As even the president of Italy, I mean, Italy is not known as a country with extraordinary leadership and pliant publics. But even in Italy, you saw a job done so that the Italians can go out and don't have to worry, as we do. Places around this country are experiencing record levels of not only deaths and hospitalizations and diseases and infections. Now, when it comes to attacking Americans on the street, Donald Trump knows exactly what to do. He's prepared to exercise real leadership. He makes sure that his paramilitary troops in Portland get all of the equipment they need. He brags about, oh, they have the best equipment. They have all of the tear gas, and they have all of the mace, and all of the vans, unmarked vans they need. He is creating on the streets of America, because of the confrontations he wants to create, he is creating an issue that he can run on. He can't run on the pandemic, obviously. He can't run on the economy. So what is he going to run on? He's going to run on law and order. And he is goading protesters around the country, starting in Portland. He is goading them into exactly the response he wants so he can justify even more of his paramilitary troops going into American cities. I mean, the irony here is that governors and mayors have been asking, demanding, pleading for months, please send us the supplies, the equipment we need. But with regard to the paramilitary forces, mayors and governors are saying, no, we don't want them. But what is Donald Trump doing? He's sending them anyway, especially into Democratic-run cities, especially into cities that have large black populations, especially into places he is listing. He's already talked about Oakland and Chicago and elsewhere. This is a travesty, folks. And meanwhile, the economy, you know, the Republican view of the economy, and I was testifying before Congress remotely last week, and I kept on getting Republicans who kept on saying to me in one way or another, oh, this is all the federal government's fault. The economy is the federal government's fault because the federal government and goaded state governments into closing down, and we didn't open fast enough. This has nothing to do with the federal government or even the state governments closing the economy down. The economy is bad because, and new research shows, that 70% of the reason for the depression we are now in is because people are rationally afraid to go into malls, and rationally afraid to go to airports and get on planes, rationally afraid to go into places where they could be subjected to COVID-19. This is not because of the shutdown orders. This is because people are behaving rationally out of rational fear. And as Donald Trump continues to ignore COVID, the economy is falling into the same depression we started to fall into in March and April. Where are rich people putting their money? They're putting it into the safest place they can find, and that is gold. Gold futures and gold prices are going up, but everything else is going down. Unemployment is going up. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but first-time claims for unemployment insurance also went up last week. Now, what's the Republican response to all of this? Remember, the Democrats in May came up with something they called the HEROES Act, which provided an extension of the $600 per week unemployment benefits that people have been living on. They have been, this $600 a week that started in late March really has been the thing that has kept millions, tens of millions of families going. It's the only thing that's kept the economy going even a little bit because people have the money they spend. But what's the Republican response? For months, the Republicans had no response. Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell said nothing, no response at all. Today, they say, okay, we are going to stop this week. Those $600 per week unemployment benefits run out. And what are we proposing? The Senate Republicans, we're going to say, okay, instead of $600, we want $200 a week. Now, let me tell you something. The way they justify this is they say $600 a week was just too much money. It discouraged people from actually going to work. There is zero evidence that that's the case. Zero evidence. The reason many people have not gone back to work is because there are no jobs. Remember, this is the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Also, people don't have childcare. If they have children, how are you going to go to a job if you don't have childcare? There is no childcare available. The entire childcare system has basically gone away, been destroyed in this COVID epidemic. Also, remember, unemployment insurance, the old unemployment insurance, the standard unemployment insurance paid only 45% of what you earned before on the job. And we've got huge numbers of people who are close to the minimum wage, which hasn't been raised in years. The minimum wage is now $7.25 an hour. So you tell me how people can barely survive on $200 a week plus their old minimum wage. They can't, and they won't. And if the Republicans are so stingy and greedy that they assume that people are going to be able to get by on $200 a week, they also are not taking consideration of the entire economy. Because you see, one of the advantages of the $600 per week, which, again, I want to make sure you understand, ends this week for almost 30 million Americans. One of the advantages is that it put some extra money in people's pockets so they could turn around and buy. You see, that's a good thing. That's called a stimulus. The fact that people have more money and they can go and buy means that other people who are still in the parts of the economy that are providing jobs that are safe. Those people have jobs. If you take away $400 a week, go from $600 a week to $200 a week, what's going to happen? Well, the economy is going to actually continue to shrink. There are going to be fewer and fewer jobs because there are not that many people that have enough money to keep the economy going. This is ludicrous. And one other thing I can say, because I, as former Secretary of Labor, I used to supervise unemployment insurance, the federal portion of unemployment insurance. I can tell you the attempt to move right now at this late date from $600 a week to $200 a week, the unemployment machinery that we finally got up and running, by April or May, there are still people around the country that are not collecting their $600 a week that they are due. But most people are finally collecting it. But you try to change that from $600 back to $200, it's going to take months. The Republicans have this notion, it's called moral hazard, that if people, average working people, average Americans, poor people, if they are given a little bit of extra money, they will not work. And yet Republicans have absolutely no difficulty giving rich people extra money in the form of tax breaks or bailouts. Look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk, one of my least favorite people in the world. Elon Musk says a couple of days ago, oh, there shouldn't be any bailouts, no additional money for average working people. No, you don't want to do that. You don't want to discourage them from working. Elon Musk, through his other hand, he's collecting billions in federal bailouts and tax breaks. I mean, this is beyond hypocrisy. This is cruelty. Or it's just plain stupidity. Right now, John Lewis is lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. The pandemic has dictated an unusual public mourning process for this civil rights hero. The least we can do, the least all of us, Republicans and Democrats, can do is honor John Lewis, honor his dedication to social justice. By the way, he's the first Black lawmaker to lie in state in the Rotunda. There are people across America who are deeply concerned about what is happening with police, what's happening in our cities. And Donald Trump's response is to double down, to create his own private police force, a secret police force. He is using people from paramilitary agents from the Justice Department and Homeland Security. Unmarked vehicles, unidentified people. They're in camouflage uniforms. Friends, I can't imagine a more inappropriate response to the crises we are going through now. 99 days from now, the election of 2020. Get rid of him. Get rid of all of the Republican enablers. Flip the Senate. And down ballot in your own states, every Republican has got to go. They don't know how to govern. They don't have a right to govern. Now, I'm going to get to your questions. Before I get to your questions, though, I've got a question for you, because also this week, it looks like Joe Biden is going to be choosing his vice presidential candidate. And this is particularly important because Joe Biden has styled himself as a transitional president. That is, Joe Biden understands that he is, after all, will be elected and serve. Hopefully, he will be elected when he's 78 years old. I don't want to be ageist about it. But the fact of the matter is that the vice president may be taking over for him, at least in the second term of a Biden administration. Let's hope and let's pray that that comes about. So who is going to be the vice president? I want to ask you, and you will see a poll pop up on your screen right now or in the comment section. And it's going to list three options. Option A is Kamala Harris. Option B for you is Elizabeth Warren. And option C is other. And that means you prefer somebody other than Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren. And there's a little bit of an experiment we're doing. So what I'd like you to do is please indicate your preference. A, Kamala Harris. B, Elizabeth Warren. C, other. And I will give you a few minutes to respond. I will get to some of your questions to me right now. That's my question to you. And I will shortly, once you have registered your opinion, I will get you the results of my poll of you. Okay, your questions. Jose Calderon, what exactly is in the new stimulus proposal? How different is it from the last one? Well, this is stimulus proposal number 4. Remember, I want to make sure for context, you understand. The Democrats in the House proposed in May the next round of stimulus for the economy. We knew, they knew, it was clear that the economy needed much more stimulus and that the CARES Act of March was not going to do it. So the Democrats in May had the foresight, and it didn't require a huge amount of foresight, to know that the economy and people needed much more money and much more resources to survive. So what's in the Democratic bill? Well, there is $1 trillion for states and for locales, because states and cities are running out of money. Tax revenues are way down. And yet the needs of states and cities to provide first responder services, education, and healthcare, and social services of all kinds for people right now during the pandemic is huge. So, number one, state and local resources. From the federal government to state and local city to state and locales, the Republicans are providing nothing. So far, the Republicans, in the Republican response, they went months without any response at all. This week, today and this week, they're coming up with something. So far, it looks like they're coming up with nothing for states and locales. And then, Jose Calderon, the other piece of that was the $600 per week that I've been talking about. Republicans want to go $200 per week. Another piece of it had to do with health care. The Democrats have come up with a lot of money so that people can afford the health care they need during this pandemic. Republicans so far have come up with zilch, nothing. Another piece of it is schools. Now, there's a big debate, obviously, about whether schools should reopen. But the issue should not be should schools reopen. The question is, how can they reopen safely? Because you've got not only students, but you've got teachers and bus drivers and custodians and everybody else surrounding a school, personnel in the school. Everybody needs to be safe. You can't do it the way schools normally run, because those are going to become hotspots if they are reopened as they have been. So you need to hire a lot of additional school personnel and teachers and keep those classrooms very small, maybe 10 students, and maintaining social distance. And you've got to make sure that temperature is taken and that students have all of the personal protective equipment, and teachers and bus drivers and everybody else. You can't do this. You can't turn this on a dime. Well, the Democratic bill has a lot of money for doing this right. The Republican bill so far, hello? Okay, another question. Jerome Kent, what if Trump refuses to leave office? Jerome Kent, I think he's going to refuse to leave. And I don't think it matters what the margin is. I don't think it matters how much Joe Biden is actually winning by. The fact of the matter is that he's going to refuse to leave. There's going to be a lot of litigation. He's going to claim voter fraud. And I think that the 3 months after, or the 2 months after November 3rd, are going to be among the most difficult months we have had in this country so far. Ultimately, he is going to have to leave if he loses. But it may take, the Supreme Court and even the generals in the United States military. By the way, the dog that didn't bark, The generals and the military are not involved in Trump's paramilitary operations around the country when Trump is trying to feed and fuel almost a civil war. Maybe that's what he's running on. What's the best way to stimulate the economy? George Singbile, why can't the government just issue the stimulus checks and unemployment for months at a time like Canada does? Isn't that the best way? Well, if we were going to start originally, George, start over again, we could probably do it that way. And Pramila Jayapal and other members of Congress come up with some very good and useful ideas. But it's very hard to start once again to come up with an entirely new system. We have a system in place. It was not the right system. It was not as elegantly designed as it could have been or should have been, but at least it was getting to people, and we should continue that. Peter Cooperstein, what if McConnell refuses to budge on any compromise with Democrats in the COVID bill? What then? Peter, if McConnell refuses to budge, the Democrats are not going to, I hope they're not going to give in, because it's clear that the Republicans are the ones who are making it difficult for Americans, what the Democrats normally do. And this was true of the Obama administration. It was even true, I remember, in the Clinton administration. The Democrats are concerned, obviously, appropriately, they should be, about people getting what they need. And so the Democrats will go over and compromise and compromise and compromise. Well, you know, my judgment here is the Democrats should not compromise. Let the Republicans take the rap. Let the public see what the Republicans believe. Let the public see that Trump and the Republicans are not there for average working people or average Americans. They are there for the wealthy and the privileged. Let the people see that, and let Mitch McConnell and the Republicans come crawling back to the Democrats and saying, okay, we will do it. We will go ahead with you and $600 a week and everything else you want. Bill Wilcox. We know the Russians are trying to hack into U.S. election machines. Why isn't action being taken to harden the machines against attack? Bill, in the HEROES Act, that is the act that the Democrats passed in May, there was about $3.6 billion to guard the election process and the election machines from foreign hacking. The Republicans have not responded. Once again, could it be maybe they don't want to guard the machines? Maybe they don't care about our election and the integrity of our election system. Maybe they would like the Russians to hack in. Maybe Moscow Mitch actually is Moscow Mitch. Marsha Woodley, why isn't Trump using the Defense Production Act to procure supplies for labs so they can quickly do their tests? Aren't late tests useless? Yes, Marsha, you were absolutely right. Why is Trump not doing that? Why is he putting first priority in an area where he doesn't even have authority, and that is to send his paramilitary troops into cities, when he is absolutely rejecting doing what he does have authority to do, that is use the Defense Production Act to get materials so laboratories can do the tests quickly and do the contact tracing. You know, if I were really being cynical, and I'm not cynical, but if I were going to be conspiratorial and cynical, I would say Donald Trump would much rather run on a kind of law and order confrontation, almost a civil war in America, than he would like to run on his record on the pandemic, because he knows that record is so disgraceful. We have time for a few more of your questions. Celinda Capron, why is anyone still supporting Donald Trump? Celinda, the polls. Now, I am, after 2016, if you are somebody who looks at the polls and says that polls are really accurately assessing where the public is, you're really beyond naive. But the polls are showing that Donald Trump's favorabilities are sinking very fast. They are also sinking, and importantly, they are sinking in places like Texas and Florida and North Carolina. These are places, not incidentally, that have been badly hit by the coronavirus. And their governors, Republican governors, have not taken appropriate measures. Georgia is another place. And so not to be gloating about something as awful as the coronavirus and the disease and infections and deaths. I simply mean to point out in the crassest, narrowest political terms that Donald Trump is losing ground even in red states, because even in red states, they're seeing what his malicious negligence is actually doing. Tamara Gilono, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Tamara, do you think young people and progressives will turn out in large numbers in 99 days to defeat Trump? Tamara, I do not know. I'm hoping that, as in the 2018 midterm elections, we're going to get a wave, a tidal wave of young people and progressives turning out. The midterms actually, to me, were really indicative. Normally, young people do not turn out in great numbers in any election, especially midterms, but the exception was 2018, and I think they're turning out. They did turn out in 2018 because they saw some very attractive candidates, young people and people of color and women, and a lot of young people were very inspired. Well, I hope they're inspired again, because there are a lot of those terrific candidates, again, young people and women and people of color running in down ballot. And I think a lot of young people also understand the damage that Donald Trump and the Republicans have wrought on this country. Audrey Kukwa, did I pronounce it correctly, Audrey? Why is the 25th Amendment not being invoked right now? Wouldn't this be the perfect moment? Audrey, are you talking about people, women, men, camera, TV? Do you get my reference? That was a test that Donald Trump apparently took. It's interesting. Why did he take this? Is a pre-Alzheimer's test. And why did he take it? Who asked him to take it? What was found in that test? Can Congress get access to that test, or at least have the doctor testify? It would be interesting to know. Listen, the results are in. We have 5,686 responses. This is a big, talk about surveys. The kind of surveys that I was giving you a moment ago were nothing compared to this survey. So what do you think? Kamala Harris, 25% of you think that Kamala Harris should be Biden's vice president. 41% of you think that it should be Elizabeth Warren, and 34% of you actually prefer somebody else. Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Elizabeth Warren wins over Harris and over all others. We will find out this week, probably. Let me just say, finally, I understand. To the extent that you are feeling what I am feeling in terms of despair and anger and boredom and fear and everything else, these are hard times. And don't be hard on yourself. You are needed. Your activism is needed. We've got 99 days. In some states, the voting actually is going to be starting in September in terms of absentee ballots. I don't know what you can do other than make sure you vote, make sure others vote, call people in swing states and get them to vote for Biden and for Democrats and down ballot. Don't succumb to third parties, because that third party just takes away from the party that is closest affiliated to you in terms of your values, hopefully the Democrats. Please be well. Please be safe. Talk next week.